Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our fifth Urban AI conversation. My name is Hubert, and I'm the founder of Urban AI. So what is Urban AI? It's a think tank that federates a global community of pioneers in the emerging field of urban artificial intelligence. And together, we are investigating the concept of urban AI, and we also propose ethical modes of governance and sustainable uses of urban artificial intelligence. But Urban AI is also a space of exchange, debate, and meetings, and this is why we organize every other Tuesday this Urban AI conversations. And today's conversation is a bit special as we have the great pleasure to partner with all things urban. So as usual, the first half will be a roundtable conversation with 4 inspiring women from the Urban AI conversation. And then we will have a kind of Q&A session. So if you have questions in mind, ask in the chat and it will be asked at the end of the conversation. But just before to begin, I let Anastasia present you all things urban.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hubert. Thank you, the audience, for joining us. We are very glad to see so many people joining us today during the day. My name is Anastasia Zavaroslava. I'm CEO and co-founder of All Things Urban. We have partnered with the think tank Urban AI to organize this session to ask the question to our experts how to actually get a job in urban AI. And we did it because we run a platform about the career in urbanism. And we are targeted at people who are looking for job in the field and for companies who hire in talents in the field. And if you're currently looking for a job in urbanism, feel free to join our platform, find different opportunities, events, conversations like this, master's programs, dive into our blog, and just join the huge community we have on LinkedIn. We always do some collaborations like this with Urban AI, and I'm sure we're going to have more partnership projects with them in the future. So yeah, please join us. And now I give the floor to one of my amazing team members, Nayla Saniour, who will be moderating the discussion and asking the question to our brilliant speakers today.
Thanks so much, Anastasia. Thanks, Hubert and Urban AI for organizing this. My name is Nayla Saniour. I'm an associate at All Things Urban. I've been working with Anastasia for 2 years now, and I'm really happy to be here today and privileged to moderate the conversation between the 4 speakers who are part of the Urban AI community. So it's going to happen today. The purpose is to talk with the guests, the 4 guests, about their educational and career paths, their professional challenges, and their advice for young or not so young professionals and urbanists. And so I'm going to be moderating this conversation. I will briefly introduce each of the speakers. Then we'll move on to a series of short questions that I'll be asking them. And finally, we'll open the floor for the audience's questions. As Hubert said, everyone who's here is invited to write their question in the chat box, and we'll select a few for the end. So I'm going to start the introductions with Chenai Sher. Hi, Chenai. So Chenai Sher is Special Advisor on Africa Innovation at the Mozilla Foundation. She has developed My Data Rights, an online portal about artificial intelligence, privacy, and data protection in the context of South Africa. Before that, her work has included research on information and communication technologies from a youth and feminist perspective. Chenai has a background in social sciences and global studies. Then moving on to Katya Lutenowski. Hi, Katya. Katya is a co-founder and vice president of Habidatum, a company that determines the commercial value of real estate locations using real-time metrics. Prior to that, she was an urban data project leader at Thomson Reuters. She's also been lecturing on urban informatics and location data analytics. And Katya has a background in urban geography and planning. And going on to Laura Narvaez. Hi, Laura. So Laura is associate partner at the Urban Design Group at Foster & Partners. She holds a PhD in architecture and the built environment from the Bartlett School of Architecture at UCL. She's practiced in Mexico City and the UK in architecture, master planning, and urban research projects. She's also lectured internationally at several universities, and she comes from a background of architecture and urban design. And finally, Naysan Saran. Hi, Naysan. Naysan is the co-founder and CEO of CANN Forecast, a company that helps cities transition towards proactive approach to water management. And they collaborate with 15 municipalities across Canada. Prior to that, she worked as scientific programmer at Environment Canada. And Naysan has a background in both computer engineering and mathematics. So here we are. Welcome to our 4 speakers. Thanks so much for all 4 of you to joining us today. And now, after the intros, we're going to start with the rounds of questions. Approximately, we have like 5 questions, and I'll be addressing the questions to each and one of you as we kind of agreed before that. And the first question I will be addressing to Naysan first, and then to Katya. Our question is, what made you choose your specialization? And how did you discover the interest in the field you're working in? So Naysan, floor is yours.
Thank you so much for this super interesting conversation, Nayla, and everyone else. Yeah, so on my end, it was more of a, I would say I got lucky in a sense because I wasn't in urban AI at all when I started. So by training, I'm a computer engineer, and I went to Environment Canada as a modeler for statistical modeling for weather forecasts. And when there, actually, they were very nice. So it was a 9 to 5 job. So I got to do a math major on the side just out of interest. And after all of this, started getting interested in AI because it's a beautiful merge between computer science and math. And then in the summer of 2016, I got into a hackathon called Aqua Hacking. And the goal of the hackathon was to create the best commercial solution that raises awareness around water. And this is there where I actually met the person who was going to be my co-founder, Nicolas. He was a biologist in everything around water. And we basically built a machine learning algorithm that was able to tell municipalities if the water, so urban waters, were contaminated for swimming, for instance, before people actually got into the water and got sick. And after the 6 months of hackathon, the product was actually better for public health than what the city of Montreal was using. So when we presented, we won the hackathon and they were interested in the product. So they said, okay, maybe we can give you a little contract to see how it goes. So this is how it all started, you know, just going, exploring and meeting people who actually do things in more urban water management, and from there deciding to build a product. So I would say that I really got lucky in this regard.
Thanks so much. And Katya?
Hello. I have slightly different kind of story that comes from academia. So I started as a geographer initially, and I was working on American statistics like Bureau of Labor Statistics or Bureau of Economic Statistics and things like that. And actually wanting to learn more and see more, but the information is lacking on the nationwide level. So I then understood there could be more information on the citywide level, and therefore started studying the urban kind of geography and urban planning, like zooming into cities. That was still not enough, and that ended up with studying additional data, and that's something that we do now, the big data analysis related to real estate and cities. And the way we started the company was that my partner, we met in the university, and the whole path from broad regions to cities and to then big data on cities was together. However, we needed to form our initial team that was not 100% technical initially. So both my partner and I, we are urbanists, economists, geographers, but not that much decoders and engineers, so forth. So initially that was just the search through the network. I was just asking people who I know, like whether or not they know cool data scientists, cool engineers who could help. And luckily we met them. Again, a bit of luck was here. There was not too much, in the field on professional networks that we could leverage there. So that was just my personal network that helped. Yeah, so that's how it happened.
Excellent, thanks so much. So both of you have an experience of just joining networks and meeting people and a bit of an element of luck. So our second question goes first to Laura and then Katya again. How did your education help you get into the place you are, whether a formal education through university, bachelor's, master's, PhD, or any type of formation?
Who should go first?
Yes, Laura. Thank you.
Well, I think from my experience, I come from an architectural background. I was always interested in doing research and apply that into practice, however that may be. So that sort of brought me an interest to do first a master's after my bachelor's degree. First, because I wanted to explore more about a certain about a certain subject and expanding my skills. So that got my interest also along the way to do a PhD. So I'm an urban practitioner, but I've always been an academic at heart as well. I did my PhD at the Bartlett in UCL within a field of what it's called space syntax, which essentially has to do with looking at cities and buildings from the perspective of the user, how space affects the user and how people can affect space. And doing a PhD, in my case, is something that I wanted to do because that is what it is. Doing that kind of research is doing a piece of research for a little longer time than a master's that you want to do, not that you have to do. So it's the same for a master's degree. And I wanted my research to have an impact in industry or in practice, or how to apply that in practice. So my purpose was to learn new skills and to contribute with something that, that could be applied to different scenarios. In my case, within the areas of urban design and urban planning. And I was also interested in combining different disciplines in my research. So topics that I really liked, that I was passionate about, and I'm not an expert on it, but I wanted to learn from as an architect. And for me, that area was urban economics or spatial economics. And I wanted to learn from that field and try to bring that into my world of urban design. So that got me a little bit to get involved in learning spatial data science and data analytics, a lot of statistics as well. So all these things helped me to combine and expand my knowledge and skills into the field that I am now. But although I must say this is kind of a personal journey, so every journey is different. So it doesn't mean that you can get to a good place, let's say, in practice only by having a PhD. Some people do not have PhDs and sometimes not even a master's, and they have excelled in what they do. So I think the important thing is to consider is to expand your knowledge and learn how to diffuse that knowledge into what you want to do. So that's my take.
Thanks so much, Laura. Great piece of advice. Your turn, Katya. How did your education help you get into the place you are?
Yeah, my message would be that my education never stops, and it's continued even now. But basically, the geographic kind of basic education was helpful in this statistical basis, let's say. So what Laura also mentioned regarding the special statistics and things like that, this is like basically very much important no matter what data you deal with, be it big data or small data, no matter. So this is like the background. And if you want to work with big data, for instance, you need to know the basics. And this is the first piece of advice. There will be advice at the end of the session, but I'm just trying to fix it. So the second portion is the, cities and the way built environment operates. And this is the master's degree that I got. But this is, again, not enough in what we do now, just because the company is focused very much on working with financial institutions and, commercial real estate. So this field of, decision making in finance, financial models, the risk analysis and things like that is something that I continue studying just in practice and in part in theory, but in parallel with my work. And as long as it progresses, of course, when you have the team around you, you can always delegate and collaborate, but to be able to collaborate efficiently, it's important to at least speak the same language. So for me, it's finance, as I mentioned, also, coding, engineering, so on. I need to understand a little from a lot of spaces. So my basic education is not enough, and I always need to keep up with what's happening.
Excellent, Katya. Thanks so much. So continuous education as an advice, and Laura, making something because you want to and not because you have to. And as Katya mentioned, we will have the last question be more a general question for all speakers who will talk about their challenges and their advice. So yeah, stick around for the end if you want to listen more about these specific pieces of advice. Third question goes to Chenai. Chenai, so we're going to talk about job opportunities. How did you look for and choose your job opportunities? And we are aware that we don't necessarily choose our opportunities, as we often take what is just presented to us or what happens to be in our life, but we also kind of direct ourselves to what we like and what we prefer. So how did you choose and look for these opportunities?
Thanks so much, Nayla. So rightly so, we often don't have the option of choice, but I think in my experience or with my career trajectory, it's really been about able to connect the dots. So initially starting from thinking about like access, because access is a big thing within the African region from a perspective of like basically who had access to mobile phones, then who had access, who has access to the internet, and then thinking about it from that gender digital divide perspective in terms of the consistent gap that exists between men more likely having access to the internet and more likely to be presented in technological spaces than women, and then how this impacts the way in which we experience technology. And by we, I'm talking about women and gender diverse people experience technology, and who often technology is designed in mind, which is often like men who exist in the system. So for me, in terms of determining how I chose my job, I think I didn't choose per se, but I shaped the direction by consistently talking about the way in which gender had a significant impact on the way in which people were accessing digital technologies. And then also thinking about it from perspective of seeing it as a trajectory of growth from access to the internet and moving into the arena of data, and then moving into specific conversations around artificial intelligence. So then being able to connect those dots in terms of thinking about that it's not necessarily a completely new topic, but everything that I've been working on, the same social justice issues that we started dealing with in terms of access continue to play out when it comes to artificial intelligence. The technology may be new, but the societal issues are the same. And then with the opportunity, so to be quite honest, a lot of people don't take artificial intelligence seriously, or the people who take artificial intelligence seriously are often like market-driven, business sector, and and coders and developers. So people just want people who can build the systems, not necessarily take into account the policy issues or the inequalities that exist from there on. So at least I had the opportunity to be a Mozilla fellow in 2019, 2020, and to be able to have this like free reign to figure out like what is the specific gendered issue and gender inequality concern that comes with AI, privacy, and data protection. And I think for me, when I started doing that, so this is a part where you don't get to choose a job. All the jobs weren't talking about like you want someone who's going to come in with a gender lens to artificial intelligence, especially if you're working on the African continent. The focus was more so how do we make sure everybody's connected to the internet? And a lot of people were like, why are you working on this? Because, you know, it should be about access. So I had at least accessed a fellowship that allowed for me to really understand an area of interest that I had. And then subsequently, I did have the opportunity to then be invited or selected by Mozilla Foundation to lead their work on Common Voice, which is an open source voice project with a particular purpose of managing the African languages fellows who are working on building up like an open source data set for Kiswahili that will be used within agriculture and finance, but with a specific focused impact on gender marginalization and rural inequality. So that's how the connected dots played out in order for me to be able to determine where I would work.
Thanks so much, Chenai. So basically the fellowship you got access to gave you a lot of opportunities to explore your fields and your interests. And also talking about your interest, whether gender or social issues or any other, also allowed you to connect these dots and bring new perspectives on existing topics. And this is how you were able to build your interests and career opportunities. Excellent. So our fourth question, we have fourth, fifth, and last question. Last question is going to be common to all. So fourth question goes first to Naysan and then Chenai again, about the professional network. How did you create your professional network? Naysan as the CEO right now and co-founder, and also Chenai. So first Naysan.
Yeah, sure. So my professional network, it was I think it's like an exponential curve, really. So at the beginning, I didn't know anybody. And luckily with the hackathon, we got to meet a couple of people who were interested to be at least give us a couple of hours per month, give us some advice. The only thing that I would say was really helpful, specifically if you have the opportunity and you want to launch your startup, if you can get into an accelerator or an incubator or something of the sorts. We got to an incubator, a startup incubator in Montreal called District 3, and they kind of opened the door for us to all of this ecosystem of companies, mentors that we had no clue it existed at all, because it's like a different world that if you don't try to get in, you will never get in. You will always be on the outside looking in. And so they actually gave us the opportunity to meet with different people, to discover how to, post our first internships, how to actually get access to other mentors, get into the community, and then sometimes it's just, I would say, being open to opportunities, and they bring more opportunities. So one of the great examples that I have is Hubert, actually. So I met him when he was doing his world tour of Urban AI, and he was at his Montreal stop, and he was he was sending in emails to a couple of cool startups that he had found, and he was like, can you guys meet with me? I'm just there for a couple of days. And I was like, sure. And if you're open to these kind of things, and it went so well, and he was so nice, and he was building something that was already great at the time. You could tell it was going to be great. And now see how Urban AI has grown. So I think it's just saying yes more than saying no at the beginning, and it's really an exponential. I believe it goes exponentially, your network. So you start by meeting 10 people, then that 10 becomes 50, then that 50 becomes 500, then 500 becomes 5,000. And at some point you realize, okay, you have this crazy network, but it's just that you kept regularly through several years meeting with people, saying yes, keeping the conversation going.
Thank you so much, Naysan. I think we have amazing advice here. We're not waiting till the end to make the advice rain. And congratulations again, recognizing the work of Hubert to this great work that Urban AI community and platform is doing. Then Chenai, again, how did you create your professional network?
I mean, just to add on to what Naysan has said, it was really, it's about being present as a person yourself in these spaces, but it's also really about the people who make the effort to create the spaces. So, we're looking at Urban AI, and we're specifically speaking to people about like, how do you carve your way path? This is already a network that someone has created. But there's also a need to really think about the way in which these spaces are created and the networks are created from that really the intersectional issues around like race and gender, the power dynamics that exist. And I'm able to join a space on Urban AI calling in from South Africa because there was this like active recognition of other Black women who like worked towards inclusion of women into these spaces, and to really be able to connect. And I think in that instance, we build up that network responding to the way in which the structural systems are often set up to exclude other people who might not have a background in tech, and or in like specifically building AI technology. So they are not allowed into these spaces, but are actually able to come in at an interdisciplinary perspective to actually respond to the questions that always emerge, say, for example, around ethics. So I think for me, I've been able to build up the network because of the spaces that other people have created, consciously knowing there's a need to include particular people who are always excluded. And another aspect to it as well is I've built up my network by building up smaller networks. So, connecting with people who are working on these particular issues through social media, which is the same thing as just like simply retweeting and then taking them to someone else who is probably more advanced in their career on a similar topic. And I found that literally opens doors, because sometimes someone thinks that they're the only one doing the work, or they might not be able to, they don't know how to connect to someone because they assume there's a barrier. And I found that doing that work of creating those networks, if you are now a networked person, actually strengthens your circle of people and how you can support them. And another thing is just basically listening to the needs of people. So right now I'm in a position of being like a grant maker or a funder, and then like really paying more attention to the needs of the community in terms of like people who actually want to get involved in these spaces. What are their needs? What do they need? Do they need money, or do they need support? Do they need access to particular people? And would it make a difference if an organization such as Mozilla actually like backed their work? So this is a kind of like the work around like movement building. So I often think like building up your networks is connected to things that are needed of a wider ecosystem. Everything can't just be on you, and then that allows for the work to continue even if you're like burn out or tap out or something like that. So I think that's for me the thinking around like networks at an individual level, networks at a systematic level, and then people who are networked creating other like smaller nodes of networks as well.
Amazing, super inspiring. So for this question, it was about saying yes to life and be daring, as Naysan said, and going from a network to a movement and create spaces for people to break barriers and join the network and the movement and general ecosystems. Thank you so much. The fifth question first goes to Laura and then Katya. Our question would be, what would be your advice for young professionals that are looking for jobs from a hiring person's perspective? We talked about this, Katya, and I think you would have some things to mention for young professionals. Let's start first with Katya and then go on to Laura. And this would be the question before the final one, where we would do a round of talking about challenges and advice. And I think maybe the audience can start putting their questions in the chat so that Anastasia can start having a look and filter them, and we'll select a few that we will talk about in the end. So again, first, Katya, what would be your advice for young professionals that are looking for jobs from a hiring person's perspective?
Yeah, from the employer's perspective, so I need to admit that there's really a lot of supply of people knowing what cities are and interested in technologies. This is the cutting edge. It used to be and still is. So we're experiencing way more kind of lack of people who start with technology and then are interested in cities. So data engineers, data scientists, engineers in general, like developers who are interested in cities. This is kind of still a very deficient field. So if you'd want to be really strongly competitive, maybe there's this link between high tech or deep statistics plus understanding and being interested in cities is what could be very demanded now. And besides, if you start with the, as I started with cities themselves, with geography itself, and then turn to technologies, what's important from my understanding is first having a focus, but second, not being afraid of change. That being said, it's not just the fancy field, urban AI or urban technologies. There are a lot of applications there. And if you'd want to do something, try to understand what triggers your motivation, what's important for you. Is it transport? Is it walkability? Is it, lively communities? Is it the economy of the city? There are a lot of fields and you need to be focused. But you may understand at some point that this is not something you were desiring to do, and then it's okay to change and to test something else. But we're looking for, people who know what they want to do.
Thanks so much, Katya. And Laura, what would be your advice for young professionals?
So my advice would be, I think I agree with Katya when she says, know what you want to do. And sometimes that's not a very straightforward thing to do. But I think it all depends what kind of interest you're searching for as well. And I'm saying this because you can be an architect, but probably more specialized in technology or in data science and not so much in design, or the other way around, etc. So I think in my industry and where I'm at the moment, or at least in the world of fostering partners, there is a strong interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary environment where collaboration is key. So my advice is not to work only on, at the area of your expertise. Maybe if you're an architect, or if you're an urban planner, or if you're a geographer or an engineer or a mathematician, doesn't matter. But also try to search how you can complement that area of expertise into other disciplines. So for example, I've seen in a lot of students that they pursue multidisciplinary qualifications for career reasons, and many choose this option as a way to build on personal interests and expand their knowledge in a range of different areas. But multidisciplinary students that are studying for career reasons have the opportunity to pursue a wide range of careers. And as a result of their varied personal and professional interests and the wide choice of subjects available to study. So I think in the end of the day, I would advise to ask yourselves, what makes you different from the rest? And technical skills are important. So as interpersonal skills, for example. So we look a lot that teamwork is very important for us. Communication as well, and how you communicate your ideas visually and verbally. But I think it's a matter of how you complement the area that you are studying at the moment, or that you're already practicing at the moment, and how you can complement to other fields, because it's also a learning curve to try to understand other disciplines or other people that are not within your field, and that can help you also advance into it. So yeah, I think that would be my advice.
Excellent, thanks so much. So from Katya, we have focus on what you want to do, but also from Laura, we have work at intersections. And now we're reaching the last questions. I see some, the chat is going a bit active, so you're welcome to keep posting your questions and we'll have a look at them. So the last question will go to all speakers. We have been having amazing pieces of advice from all four speakers. And so for this one, I'm going to combine the two questions in one, maybe. What were the major challenges or struggles in your career till now? Obviously, it wasn't all an easy path. Obviously, it's not. Now you can talk about your career in a clear way, but only in retrospect. So maybe looking at what were your major challenges and your struggles, and ending with a little advice to your younger self or to young urbanists right now. I know we talked about advice, but maybe we'll do that. Challenges and advice to younger self and young people. We'll start with Katya first, then Chenai, then Laura, and finally with Naysan, and we'll open the questions. So Katya, let us know about your challenges and advice.
The challenges, well, I can talk a lot as an entrepreneur about the challenges of having a company, and there you can just Google the day of the founder and find a lot of memes around that. That's every day you're up and down, and this is the way to live with, and just the first days this is hard, and then it's easier and accepted, and it never ends. But from the urban kind of analyst perspective, I would just repeat that it's more. I'll join Laura's message about the interdisciplinarity, let's say. So trying to be yourself and grow around you the community of hybrid kind of specialists who can talk the same language. And from my experience, this is the part. So being in one team with people who are doing back-end engineering of databases, other people doing, web design and front-end engineering of web interfaces, then data scientists digging into machine learning. You're trying to think about why it matters. And then an economist says there's some theory to link it to, and all of that, having all that people in one room and being able to speak, at least somehow, this is a challenge, but it's a challenge that's possible to overcome. And there's no, perfect scenario here. Just maybe just having basic knowledge in this, at least this variety of fields in our case, was the solution.
Amazing, thank you. Chenai, what were your challenges and advice to your younger self and young urbanists?
Yeah, so I think I'll start with advice and then end up with challenges so that people can see the connection. I think the advice is always to show up as who you are and really be strategic in terms of thinking about the things that you want to achieve at the end of the day and the things that you want to do. And I think one of the things also in thinking about all of this work is to be okay with having fun with the work, because I realized that I've been able to think about some of these issues from a perspective of what are the things that bring you joy and what are the things that you're building up to address an issue. And I think then this links to the challenges of the reality that, finding employment in some of this work is always quite systematic, has systematic structures of inequality placed into them. I've already talked about race. I am thinking about gender. I'm also thinking about sexually diverse people who are not in the binary. So I often think that as much as one would want to see the space as being neutral and all you have to do is really work hard, the reality is that there is gatekeeping as according to the identity that you hold and as according to the things that you value that does impact how you're able to navigate in these spaces. And I think in addition to that, it's also geographic. I'm a person who's from the African continent. I struggle more to be able to actually participate in the spaces in terms of attending a conference because I can't get a visa. And so those are the logistical things that often one has to deal with when trying to get employment in the spaces, because as much as you're equally qualified as the next person, we exist in a structural world that actually then says, but because you hold a particular passport, but because you hold a particular race, but because you hold a particular gender, you are seen as less in this context. So a lot of the times, the challenges I've had to deal with have been structural challenges that undermine my ability to participate in this space. And I think another challenge that probably Katya has already mentioned, but the interdisciplinary aspect in terms of who is valued more in the room. So people more likely to listen to the economist or the person who has the data science background developing a solution than they would listen to someone who has the social sciences background to actually critiquing the things that are being implemented that, 5 years down the line, people are like, oh no, we shouldn't have ever allowed for that company to exist because look at the social harm that it's doing. But people who write about social harm already raised the flag, but they were ignored because they don't have the right background by the standards of the community. So those are some of the challenges that I faced, and really the advice was for me, which I mentioned to show up, really meant continuously pushing through these walls and continuously reaffirming that you actually contribute something of value to this space, even if other people might not see it, and then building onto that network that actually then, like solidifies the points that emerge with it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. On your turn, Laura, what are the major challenges and your advice for young urbanists?
I think I resonate with the order of Chenai. I'll start with my younger self and then the challenges, because that has a link, and then the advice to young urbanists. I think the advice probably to my younger self is don't leave the things that you can learn now for later. Because at least for me, even though I was dealing with, certain things, I was working and studying at the same time. I was always trying to find, certain areas that I say, I want to learn about this because this is becoming important, etc. And then within the practice, I sort of learned that you need to keep up a little bit with the updates of new knowledge, of new trends, of new technology, new innovations, new skills, etc. I would just say, don't leave it for later down the line, because then it all depends on your interest, of course. But I think that's something that a constant, I don't know if training is the right word, but a constant, let's say, update of things that, again, it's learning from others. It's sort of, I think you need to keep it constant. And as far as the challenges goes, from the perspective, or at least the experience on how I wanted to get a job, I was also in the terms of here in the UK. I'm originally from Mexico, but I've been here already 14 years in the UK, in London. But I did have challenge a lot of what it means to students in a foreign country and having to deal with these issues. And I think my advice in that sense is you need to keep on going. And even though, if doors open up for you, because there are other things that it's out of your control, then don't be afraid of the change. That would be one thing. And the other one is that unexpected doors might come in. I had initially, my aim was to continue in academia after a PhD, and Foster & Partners opened up for me the door. And then that's something of not a shift, but it was a different sort of aim that I had on, and I took the opportunity to it, and that opened me even more doors. And as far as, challenges within the practice now itself along the way, is try to remember always to have a voice. Have a voice in what you want to contribute, in communicating your ideas, to communicate the work to others. And if you come from a specialized background or not, it's just important to transfer those ideas or that expertise to others in a more effective way. And in a way that can, it's communicated through any kind of thing, into a result, into a a visualization, into a design, a project, etc. But I think the one of the challenges that you need to learn from is really to have a voice in your own work and what you're contributing to. So lastly, I mean, and I'm saying this because when I said that the doors open up for me more is because I didn't have any knowledge about AI at all. I sort of started to understand that field along my way in practice and academia. And I think Chenai put it in a very nice way, and also over, a lot of people relate to AI as just purely, machine learning or coding or whatever, and it's not really about that. Of course, it's related to that, but it isn't just about that. You don't have to be an expert in coding to actually understand AI. There are other dimensions to it that needs other kinds of expertise, and this is why I go through a lot of the core of interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary. So that would be my advice. Just keep on learning, no matter how experienced you might become. This goes for the young and the not so young. And keep updating yourself with those new knowledge and new strands of work. And I think most importantly, be patient. Things will come. That would be my advice.
Okay, amazing. Going to Naysan, your turn. Challenges and advice. We're gonna end with that, and then we'll have.
I'll go really quick because I gotta get my tires fixed. I'm really sorry about that. Challenges. I think everybody had a great point. So to Laura and Katya's point, you gotta keep learning. This field, it moves so fast. Even if you come from a technical background, you really gotta update yourself, and you really gotta also, especially if you're from a technical background, you really gotta put in the effort to actually understand the urban part. And even if you have people on your team that are doing it, you need to be able to communicate with them. I think it was mentioned multiple times. And as Chenai said, keep having fun. One thing that I realized, nothing is ever going to be perfect. And really, if you want things to be perfect, it's going to be a hard ride. So that's all I had. Thanks so much for the conversation. I really have to leave, but it was really a pleasure.
Naysan, thank you so much. Bye, and we'll continue the conversation without Naysan now. I think Naysan really had a wrap at all the advice that I was wanting to, summarize. Basically, be yourself, work at the intersections, learn from the different disciplines and learn their languages from Katya. And then from Chenai, have fun with your work, reaffirm your value and push through, do the things that bring you joy. From Laura, learn now, not later, keep on constantly learning, say yes to life opportunities and be patient. And Naysan did this great summary with her amazing energy. So I think right now we're gonna have a wrap up, maybe look at the questions. Anastasia, I'd like, if you have any suggestion for the questions that we would like to ask.
We had a few questions. Two of them are again a bit more about advice to a younger self. What would you like to tell yourself younger? But there was one a bit more specific, and I think it would be curious to know what our experts think. So I'm the person says, I'm an architect and urban designer and currently doing masters in data science and analytics. I'm interested in working digital twins of cities. What will be my way forward? Any advice to get a job in this sector? Thanks in advance.
So if any of the speakers, Chenai, Katya, or Laura, feel free to answer.
I can add some perspective here. So just research perspective, what comes to mind are a couple of companies in this field, like for instance, Citizenis, the company doing digital twins, but this is just, the start. I wanted to tell you more about the process. So you can look at this company specifically. Maybe that's not a fit. Try Googling its competitors, try following where they hang out, what events they attend, and so on. So then you will get a list of 20, 30 companies around this space, maybe even more. if you want to, focus on just, companies working directly on digital twins, maybe you're interested in companies with a digital twin kind of department within them, then you could look for something else. Maybe the large architecture bureaus have that. But just, picking up one company, Citizen as an example, I'll put it in chat, sorry for my pronunciation, and then just, Google their competitors, go to their website, see events.
Thank you so much, Katya. We have 5 more minutes before the end of the event. Maybe we can take 1 or 2 questions. Anastasia, if you have identified any.
Sure, there's another one which is also a little bit more specific, and I'm also curious to know some insights from our speakers. Thank you for this insight. Do you see an important role for policymakers, advisors, sociologists in your environments? Maybe some of our speakers deal with these fields, work more with policymakers. What do you think? How much the work of policymakers is important in what you're doing?
Maybe Chenai?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to take that. I see this space is very, very important. I'm a sociologist by training, so that validates that. But a lot of the times there's a need to, when we think about like even AI, when we think about artificial intelligence and the shift that we want to see, we think about it from an ecosystem perspective. That means having to work with policymakers in order to implement the right policies and for them to understand the technology so that there isn't just like a knee-jerk response whenever something new and shiny pops up, or whenever something new comes up and there's a concern around the issues that are at hand. There's a need to actually work with sociologists in terms of thinking about the social impact of these issues and to really unpack how we can have an impact as we're building up even AI, but at the same time, the issues around harms that may emerge from these technologies being implemented. So I think from an ecosystem perspective, there is definitely a role for policymakers, researchers, and sociologists in this space.
Thank you so much, Chenai. I think we have space for 1 more question before giving the floor back to Hubert to conclude. Anastasia, would you have any suggestion? We can't hear you. You're muted.
Apologies. Yeah, so we have 1 more question, which I think will finalize this conversation very well. It's about career shifts. And we have a question from young urban planner who wants to shift their career to data scientist or more tech-based jobs, such as gift specialist, coding, or at least maybe combine these 2 areas. What would be your advice for these people? Maybe what kind of courses should they take? What kind of technologies first they should learn? What would be your advice for that?
Maybe we can take that. I think, shifting the career to data scientist or more tech-based from urban planning is not that different. You can shift it if you like, but it's applicable in many ways. And you can, start doing things of areas of coding or a master's in data science. They usually call it data science or visualization and data visualizations as well. Usually there are already areas where the combination of urban planning and data science is combined already as a master's, for example. And that can be applied again to other tech industries in whichever industry you apply. So I don't see it as a major shift. I see it as a complementary shift, if that's okay. So I would say that the choice is actually quite wise from your side. So I think it's a good combination. That's what I'm saying. I don't think it's rather different. So if you want them, that keep on pushing on that, I would say.
Thank you so much, Laura. I think we have reached the end of the session. It was a really inspiring hour. Before giving back the floor to Hubert, I'd really like to thank our 4 speakers for their beautiful presence, their amazing advice. And really, it was such a pleasure to listen to your genuine, authentic advice. I'm sure the audience really enjoyed this. And thank you so much, Hubert, for organizing this as a partnership with All Things Urban, and floor is yours to finish this beautiful conversation.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Nayla and Anastasia, for this great collaboration. It was really nice to partner with you. And of course, thanks Laura, Chenai, Katya, and thanks to Naysan for accepting to share your journey and advice. Like, it was super insightful, and it also allowed me to learn a bit more about your academic background. And so yeah, last element. So we will have our next Urban AI conversation next week with Martin Sukel, who is AI lead at the City of Amsterdam, and we will try to understand if Amsterdam is the most Urban AI ready city in the world. And in the chat, you have the replay also of our previous Urban AI conversations. Thanks everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.